TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We're going to learn how to colorize a black and white photograph. Now, if you don't know what that means, what it means is you take a black and white photograph and using Photoshop, you turn it to color. It's actually a relatively simple process. The good news is you don't need any special equipment to do this, just a copy of Photoshop. I'm actually using my tablet, but that's just because I find it easier to draw with the pen. But you can do this just with Photoshop. It's really cool. It's really interesting. Essentially, we're going to be creating a number of solid layers and then using various blend modes. We're just going to overlay those colors onto the black and white photograph. There is a little bit of sort of history to this in that, say, for example, you need to know what colors would have been used during the time that the photograph was taken, things like getting the clothes right, stuff like that. But if you want to just sort of jump right in and pick any color you want, you can do that as well. Here's one I did earlier, which is like a mugshot from the 1920s. And this is another one that we're going to be doing now. What I'm probably going to do is sort of explain each bit and then fast forward through me actually doing the rest of it and then jump back in when I've got something else to say. Otherwise, we'll be here forever. So the first thing you're going to want to do, if you want to, I particularly don't, is restore the photograph a little bit. You can see there are sort of marks and pocks and things missing from all over this photograph. If you want to, what you can do is using the clone stamp tool, you can zoom right in. Say, for example, there's a fleck on his cheek here. Holding Alt, you can sample a color palette, and then you can just clean up some of the imperfections. You can see there's like a dot here, for example. You sample the color you want to clean it up with, and you can replace it. Now, I could go through and do all of these if I really wanted to, but I kind of like remove that hair there, for example. If I take a larger sample here. Yep. So I could go through and I could fix all of those things, but I kind of like the charm that it has of a broken sort of pockmarked photograph. Bear in mind, you can fix that. I'm going to leave the ones I have done though, because he's got rid of that mark on his face and other things like that, which is good way to start. So the first thing you're going to want to do is start with a single layer, which you're not going to touch. You can lock it if you like, because the only thing we're going to be doing with this layer is using the quick select tool, which if you don't have, you've probably got the magic wand tool. So make sure you're in quick select, and you're basically just going to be drawing over certain parts of the photograph on this layer. So the first thing you need to understand is that each different color you want has to be on a separate layer. So I'm going to start with his skin first of all. And all I'm going to do is using the quick selection tool with a relatively soft brush, I'm just going to quickly color over each section of his skin. Now, don't worry, you can clean this up, you can tidy it up, like I've got some of his hair there, for example. I'm also going to do this side as well and see where we get to with that. So here we want his hand and his other hand. Now you can see that all these sections and stuff have jumped out. That's fine. All you've got to do is holding down Alt, draw those sections again, and it will sort of trim. And then if you let go of Alt, you can start adding to it again, and so on and so forth until you get the border that you'd like. So tidy up down here near his chin, along here around his cheek, get rid of all this around his ear. Now, Smart Selection has come a long way in Photoshop to the point where it's actually really quite accurate these days. So this is actually probably the most efficient way to do it. If you wanted to, you could of course just dive right in and start coloring manually, which you might have to do around the hair and other intricate things like that. But for getting started, this is fine. The other good news of the way of doing it this way is that everything is a mask, so you can come back and edit it later. None of this process is destructive, which is a godsend really, because if it was, you'd be here forever. Just going to make sure I've got the rough outline of his hand coloured in there. We'll keep that dark section, see what it looks like. And we're just going to remove these sections from his hand here. Sure. Like so. That doesn't look too bad. Just remembering, take off this tie. We don't want any of that. We don't want any of his hair. like so. You might have to zoom in a bit to get it a bit more accurate. And it's worth getting this right, but if there is a tiny bit you can't get perfect, like for example in his ear here, what you can try doing is changing the hardness of your brush, which will help refine the edges just a bit more. And what we're also going to do now is using the refine edge tool, we're going to sort of soften the edges of this a little bit, just so that we're not struggling essentially like I am now. With selecting the sections that you want. If I just zoom in another tiny bit, I can probably whip off that bit of hair. There we go. You see, it's not that wide either. Perfect. Okay, great. So I've selected every single piece of skin that I can see. What I'm going to want to do now is go to refine edge. Now, in older versions of Photoshop, refine edge is right here. However, in the newer ones, you have to go to select and hover over select and mask, and then hold shift and click it. And that brings up the refine edge tool. Don't ask me why that is the case. You can see, for example, here that I've got an extra bit of hair that I don't want, and along here as well. Now, usually you can just brush this, but every time I tried to do that, it did crash Photoshop. So what I'm going to do instead is cancel it, hold Alt, and just run my pen along those sections, so that when I go back in, it's now removed them. Okay, we're going to want to turn on Smart Radius, so that it understands the edges of where you want a little bit better, and just crank it up by a couple of pixels. There we go. And then smooth that out probably by about the same amount and hit OK. And what that's done is that's just taken the edges of our thing here, of our selections, and smoothed them out a bit. Now we're going to want to go down to the adjustment layers panel, and we're just going to choose solid color. Now, it takes a while to get the skin tone right. I'll say that now. So the best thing to do is just select a color that is pretty much what you want, that looks roughly skin shaded, and hit OK. And then just take this blend mode up here and change it to either overlay or color. Those are probably the two that work best. Overlay or color. Now, I think color is going to work best for this one. You can see that along the edges of the ear and stuff, there's some bits we missed out, but that's fine. If we just go to double click on here, what you can do then is adjust the color until you find one that you're happy with. Now, the darker colors, if you're on a color overlay, don't shine through quite as much. So what you can do is switch to overlay, double click the color, and change it and see if that works a bit better. Now, one thing we have with this photograph is we're getting a bit of a false positive with our colors, because the original one has this slight yellow tinge to it. So what you can do is go through, take that saturation all the way down, which changes it to pure black and white, and then overlay that color back on top. Let's tweak it again. The other problem is, of course, I'm working on a graphics tablet that only has 76% color accuracy. So I could be tweaking away to my heart's content, be happy with it, and then move it to a different screen and it looks completely different, which I'll just do now. But that looks not too bad, actually. So I'll just pop it back on there. Just something to be aware of course, that they're going to have different colors depending on what screen you use to look at it. So the reason we've done it this way with the mask is because when I've missed areas like this, I can just go to my mask layer, making sure I'm selected over in the layer palette here. Give myself a nice small brush size. Making sure, of course, I'm on the brush tool. And simply touch these up. Like so. The best thing to do is to touch up parts around the edges, but not worry too much until you've got all the block colors around it done. For example, when I make the mask of this background, that's going to overlay and change it and things like that as well. But if there's some bits which clearly have to be skin, which aren't, like on the back of his fingers here, and like the knuckles around here, you can just go through and touch those up. This is where having the pen comes in really, really handy. Okay, same thing along here, around his hairline and ears and stuff like that. Now, obviously, if you wanted to, what you could do is just create a new color layer, say, for example, his jacket, like this. New solid color, choose sort of a nice dark blue, change it to overlay, or whatever color mode that you want. Maybe let's try color. No, I think overlay works better. Then what you could do with this mask that's applied, you can invert the mask so everything is hidden, and then just paint it in if you really wanted to. I find that's great for accuracy, but takes a bit longer. So the quickest way to do it is actually the way we have been with the quick select tool. So you can simply go in with a slightly larger brush and just paint in an area and then refine the edge. Just because that takes up a little bit less time than doing it manually. Especially seeing as you can go in and edit it again afterwards anyway, it really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to fast forward through this bit, the selection process, and then come back in once I've grabbed everything that I need. Okay, welcome back everyone. So I've selected every part of the suit that I can manage, and I'm just going to come down to new adjustment layer and solid color, and I'm going to choose a nice dark blue for the suit. I think that's going to work well in this situation. And then it's a choice between overlay and color. I think overlay, but I'll make the suit just a touch brighter. Like so, there you go. Okay, so once again, there's a bit down here by the leg and stuff. You can go through and you can clean that up. Now, this pretty much is what you do the whole way through. It really is that simple. Just make sure, oops, I tapped the mic there. Make sure that I'm on white, of course. So that's like the whole process. It is really that simple. I'm just going to quickly drop this background color onto black so that I can just swap these. That is pretty much the whole process. It then just becomes a case of being patient, going through and coloring everything. One thing to note, of course, is that the more time and effort you put into this, the better it's going to look. This really is a process way of working. It's not something you can just bash out and then you're done. The more time you spend on the details, the better this is always going to look. That is a guaranteed thing. So don't start this unless you've got a lot of patience. So speaking of, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep working through this on fast forward mode, and I'll drop in and out anytime that I do something particularly interesting that I think you guys would need to understand to be able to do it. But simply the rest of this process really is as simple as that. It's going through, selecting, choosing a color and carrying on. So I'll see you on the other side. Okay, so as you can see here, I've selected pretty much every section of wall that I can find. I'm going to come back through and do these parts of the chair here. But if I increase the contrast, it makes a bit of a harder edge, which makes sense because the character is going to sort of stand out from it. Maybe something like 28 to 30%. And all that does is sort of just toughen up those lines a bit against his shirt and things like that. You will get a little bit of a halo effect, but you can come through and touch that up manually, which you'll need to do with the suit and stuff anyway. So not too much of a problem. Just going to drop in a solid color, choose some disgusting murky brown, brownish yellow, and stick it on color mode. Voila, there you go. Yeah, I think color works better than overlay in this situation. And we're just going to tweak that until we find something we're happy with. One thing, of course, I forget to mention is it's always best to name your layers, something which I haven't been doing. So I'm just going to do that now. One thing I have come to learn, obviously I'm still relatively new to this sort of thing, is that even stuff that you think is black isn't black. Like his pair of shoes, for example, you'd say, yeah, he's wearing black shoes, but they're always going to have some kind of color to them. And to solve that, this is a very dark grey blue that is pretty much black, but it just adds that extra level of intensity to it, purely because something is never actually black. It's never actually completely devoid of color, ever, really. So yeah, keep that in mind. Okay, so one thing here, I know that I want the tie to be the same color as the waistcoat, so there's no point sort of sampling that again since it's such a small area. So what I'm going to do instead is duplicate the layer that I've got the tie on. Excuse me, just opened up another window there. So this is the tie. I'm just going to duplicate that layer. I'm going to call it waistcoat, and selecting the mask, I'm just going to cover it in so it's completely black, swap out my layers and just manually fill in these really small areas with a bit of color. This is where having a stylus and a graphics tablet really come in handy. I thought those shadows would look good, but they don't. Like so, for example. Now, obviously, I can just go back to the tie layer here and do it on this bigger one too. Now, it may seem silly, since it's the same color, to have these on separate layers. But the reason is it allows you to keep those borders for each section separate from each other, which is great for if you want to come back later and change the color of something. Which obviously you couldn't do if you start getting lazy and merging layers together, which is why, even though it takes a little bit longer, I'm making sure to keep everything on a separate layer. Okay, so one thing is where you've slightly overlapped each layer, there's going to be areas where the colors sort of connect to each other. Now, because of our filtering and our refining edges, we do get a nice little halo, but what it does mean is that it is important to keep your layers pretty much in order, just in case you do overlap in ways that you don't want it to. It just means that you're kind of future-proofing yourself a little bit. So one thing with the hair is that obviously it's going to take a lot of tweaking to get right with all those individual strands and everything. So sometimes with the hair, it is best to just do it manually and see what you come up with. Otherwise, you just don't get that level of control that you need for all the intricacies around the edges. So another thing which is quite nice to do is you can duplicate the exact same layer on top and then play with the opacity just to get the strength of a certain color up. I find that with the hair and stuff, if you duplicate and then just put about a third more layer on top, that tends to give it just a nice little bit of solidity. And of course, if you wanted to, you can tweak the color of that just to pick out some more different parts of the hairline. One thing you'll notice when you zoom in to do stuff is that you'll find parts you've missed, like a little halo here around his cheeks where the wall doesn't quite connect. That's why we do everything on mask layers, because I can just simply select the wall layer, go down here by his sleeve, and just colour that in a little bit. Another thing to be aware of course, is that people do have eyebrows, but we've actually filled in the skin layer. So when you colour the eyebrows here, just rather gently, it's going to have that skin color come through as well, which might be a problem. To countermand that, what you can do is just go up to your skin layer, push it below the hair, so you know the hair layers is on top, and then you can just color out parts of the skin underneath the hair layer, like so. And then taking the hair layer here, you can start to fill that in a little bit on top. So another thing to note as well is with the skin, really take your time adding extra layers. You can see here that I've just added a little bit of pinkness to the lips, probably still a touch too far, might drop it down a little bit. It's barely noticeable, but when you take it away, you can see immediately the face just looks really flat, and I'm going to keep building this up around the cheeks and lips and things like that, just to give the face a bit more definition and a bit more realism to it. Okay, everybody, I think that'll do for today. What you can see is we've started off with our black and white photograph, and we've managed to colorize it a little bit. Now, this is by no means perfect. I can already see sort of parts which I want to continue tweaking and fixing. The biggest one of those being the skin color, which I just can't seem to get right this time around. But that's the beauty of this. You can just go back in and keep tweaking to your heart's content. Around the edges of the hair, the color of the skin. Maybe you want to change the suit from blue to a different color. Maybe he can be wearing a nice red suit or a green suit. That is the beauty of this working in Photoshop. You can tweak to your heart's content until you're happy. I think I am, for the purposes of this tutorial. So thanks very much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you want anything more like this. And if you do any of this, send it all along. Send it along to my Facebook page, pop it along in the Discord, anything like that, because I find this really interesting. I find it a really interesting exercise to do. And it's a great way to teach yourself how to control the pen and things like that in Photoshop. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.